Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
Most people think he came back because he finally understood the connection. That's not always true. Sometimes he comes back because the silence stopped protecting him. Because one random Tuesday night, he reached for his phone without thinking and realized there was nobody left he actually wanted to text. Because months later, her absence started showing up in stupid little places he couldn't control. The empty passenger seat, a song he pretended not to notice, the way he started cleaning the apartment at 1 a.m. just to stop thinking. And the worst part, a lot of divine masculines don't leave because they feel nothing. They leave because they feel too much too fast, and they honestly don't know what to do with that kind of emotional exposure. So they stall. They disappear. They become colder after intimacy. They convince themselves they need space. And sometimes by the time they finally understand what they lost, she's already emotionally gone. Not angry, not chasing, just gone. This video isn't about making him the villain, and it's definitely not about romanticizing his behavior. It's about the uncomfortable reality of regret that arrives late, the kind that grows slowly, quietly, in the body first, long before the ego admits it. The strange thing about a lot of masculine energy is that from the outside, it can look incredibly certain right before it collapses internally. That's what people misunderstand. They think if he walked away calmly, if he sounded emotionally controlled, if he didn't beg, if he disappeared quietly, then he must have been sure. But sometimes silence is not certainty. Sometimes silence is just someone trying not to drown in front of another person. And honestly, I think some men leave relationships emotionally halfway dissociated already. Not because they never cared. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the feelings got so intense that their system started treating intimacy like pressure instead of safety. So they become practical, logical, cold in small ways first. Not immediately cruel, that's important. It usually starts subtly. The delayed texts, the distracted eye contact, the "I'm just tired" responses, the emotional flatness after moments that should have brought closeness. And if you've lived through this kind of connection, you know exactly what I mean. 1 week he's staring at you like he finally found somewhere safe to land. The next week he's acting weird because you asked a completely normal question like, "Are you okay?" And suddenly he says, "Why are we making everything so serious?" Even though tonight's earlier he was the one talking about forever. That contradiction messes people up because it doesn't feel fake. That's the problem. It felt real when he held you closer. It felt real when he stayed awake talking until 3 a.m. It felt real when his voice softened in those unguarded moments where he forgot to protect himself. But then something shifts. And honestly, I don't think the shift always happens consciously. I think sometimes his body notices emotional exposure before his mind does. That's why he pulls away right after intimacy sometimes. Not always physical intimacy either. Emotional intimacy. The dangerous kind. The kind where you accidentally reveal yourself too much. The kind where someone starts seeing the parts of you normally keep hidden behind humor, routines, work, detachment, sarcasm, whatever version of emotional armor you learned to survive with. And once that exposure happens, some men start behaving strangely. Not because they stop feeling, because now they can't stop feeling. There's a difference. I remember this one moment someone told me about. It stayed with me because it was so painfully ordinary. She said they had spent the whole evening laughing in the kitchen while making food neither of them really knew how to cook. Music playing too quietly. Burnt garlic smell in the apartment. Nothing dramatic. At one point, she looked at him and said, "You seem peaceful tonight." And apparently he just froze for half a second. Not visibly enough for her to fully notice, but enough. Because later that night, after she fell asleep on the couch with her head against his shoulder, he got weirdly distant, started checking his phone constantly, started talking less, started acting emotionally somewhere else already. And she kept thinking, did I do something wrong? But sometimes the truth is uglier and sadder than that. Sometimes a man experiences genuine closeness, and instead of relaxing into it, his nervous system starts preparing for loss. So he creates distance before the attachment becomes undeniable. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Some masculine energy is deeply uncomfortable being emotionally witnessed, especially if he's spent most of his life being valued for composure instead of vulnerability. So when someone finally reaches him emotionally, it doesn't only feel beautiful, it also feels dangerous. Because now there's something to lose. And if he's emotionally immature, which honestly, sometimes he is, he'll call the feeling pressure instead of fear. He'll say, "I just need space." But if you look closely, sometimes even he didn't fully understand what he meant by that. "I need space." From her? No. Then from what? And that's where the silence usually begins. Not loud silence. Worse, polite silence. The kind where he still replies, but slower. Still says he cares, but less directly. Still watches her stories. Still checks her name. Still keeps emotional access nearby without fully participating in the relationship anymore. That in-between state destroys people emotionally, because the mixed signals feel intimate one second and emotionally absent the next. And I think some men genuinely believe they can control this phase. Like they can temporarily disconnect, organize themselves internally, then come back emotionally clearer. But emotions don't really work like that. Especially not after real attachment. The body keeps records even while the ego is pretending everything is manageable. That's why he may look calm externally while internally becoming more fragmented by the week. You see it in small behaviors. The sudden obsession with productivity. The emotionally detached gym phase. Staying busy constantly. Falling asleep to noise because silence starts getting uncomfortable. Driving around late at night for no reason. Sometimes he doesn't even realize why he's restless. He just knows he can't fully relax anymore. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody romanticizes enough. Sometimes he hurts her while trying to avoid being hurt himself. Not intentionally, but still he does. Because avoidance has collateral damage. And unfortunately, emotional confusion inside him does not feel confusing to the person receiving it. To her, it feels personal. It feels like, why did you open me up emotionally if you were going to disappear afterward? Why did you make me feel chosen, then suddenly act emotionally unavailable? Why did you hold my face like that, then become cold the next morning? And honestly, sometimes he asks himself the same questions later, just much later. Too late sometimes. That's the tragedy underneath a lot of this dynamic. The regret usually doesn't arrive during the leaving. It arrives after the emotional numbness wears off. But during the leaving phase, a lot of men are running almost entirely on emotional self-protection, which is why they can look so calm while breaking something meaningful. I knew someone once who admitted that after ending things, he immediately cleaned his entire apartment at midnight. Not because it was dirty, because he couldn't regulate what he was feeling. So he organized drawers, folded clothes, wiped counters that were already clean, then sat on the edge of the bed staring at his phone for almost an hour without texting her, just opening the chat, closing it, opening it again. He said the worst part wasn't even the sadness yet. It was the weird emotional suspension. Like his body knew something irreversible had happened. But his ego was still trying to frame it as freedom. And maybe that's why some masculine regret arrives late. Because first comes relief. Or what feels like relief. Relief from vulnerability. Relief from emotional intensity. Relief from being deeply seen. But underneath that temporary calm, something unresolved starts growing quietly. And the man usually doesn't notice it immediately because externally, life continues. Work still happens. Friends still call. The gym still opens at 6 a.m. People still laugh at his jokes. He still posts normal things. Meanwhile, internally, certain moments start haunting him in strange ways. Not the dramatic moments. That's the weird part. Not the fights. Not the breakup itself. The small moments. Her sitting cross-legged on the bed talking about something random. The look on her face when he emotionally pulled away and she tried not to show it hurt. The softness in her voice the last time she asked, "Are you sure?" That question destroys some men later. Not immediately. Later. Because sometimes when he said, "I'm sure," he wasn't actually sure. He was overwhelmed. There's a difference. And deep down, part of him probably knew it even then. The part nobody prepares you for is how normal he can look right after walking away. Not devastated. Not spiraling. Not collapsing emotionally the way people expect. Sometimes he actually looks lighter. And I know how painful that is to hear when you were the one left sitting inside the emotional wreckage trying to understand what just happened. Because from her side, everything still feels alive. The conversations still echo. His fingerprints are still on random objects in the apartment. There's still a half-used bottle of water he left near the bed. The nervous system is still waiting for his name to appear on the screen. Meanwhile, he's posting gym stories, laughing with friends, replying less emotionally, acting weirdly okay. And honestly, part of him is relieved. That's the uncomfortable truth. Not relieved because she meant nothing. Relieved because the emotional intensity stopped pressing against his chest every day. There's a difference. A huge one. Some men experience deep emotional intimacy almost like overstimulation. Especially if they've spent years emotionally compartmentalizing everything. Work goes in one box. Stress goes in another. Loneliness gets numbed out with distractions. Vulnerability gets delayed indefinitely. Then suddenly someone comes along who reaches places inside him he normally keeps under control. And at first it feels incredible. Addictive even. Because there's finally warmth, connection, emotional visibility. Someone noticing the exhaustion underneath the performance. But eventually, for some masculine energy, closeness starts feeling like exposure. Not consciously at first. His body just starts reacting. He becomes more irritable, more distracted, more emotionally inconsistent. One day, he wants closeness desperately. The next day, he feels trapped by the very intimacy he asked for. And when he finally pulls away, there is often an immediate exhale afterward, like tension releasing. Not because he stopped caring, because avoidance temporarily reduces emotional pressure. That's why the early separation phase can look so confusing. She's grieving the connection. He's trying to stabilize himself emotionally by creating distance from it. Those are two completely different internal experiences happening at the same time. And honestly, sometimes he mistakes relief for certainty. That's the dangerous part. He thinks, "See, I feel calmer now, maybe leaving was the right decision." But calmness after emotional withdrawal is not always peace. Sometimes it's just emotional sedation. Like finally stepping out of a room that became too emotionally loud for him internally. There's this specific kind of masculine shutdown that people misunderstand because it doesn't look dramatic. It looks functional. He still goes to work, still answers messages, still jokes around, still acts capable, but emotionally he's gone strangely flat. And because society rewards emotional control in men, nobody notices when emotional disconnection starts becoming self-abandonment, including him, especially him. I remember hearing someone describe it like this. She thought I was doing great after the breakup because I looked calm. But honestly, I just couldn't feel myself fully yet. That sentence stayed with me because delayed grief is real. Some people emotionally process relationships while they're still inside them. Others process them months later after the distraction fades. And masculine avoidance often delays emotional impact instead of eliminating it. But in the beginning, the relief phase feels convincing. He slips easier for a few nights. The arguments stop. The emotional expectations disappear. Nobody is asking, "What are you feeling? Where is this going? Why do you seem distant lately?" And for someone uncomfortable with emotional confrontation, that silence can initially feel like freedom. He tells himself he's focusing on himself now, and maybe part of him genuinely believes that. So he reorganizes his routines: gym, work, late-night drives, video games, friends, random productivity phasers, anything that gives movement without emotional stillness. Because stillness is where the feelings start catching up. And if you pay attention closely, the behaviors during this phase become strangely revealing. Some men become hypersocial after separation, constantly outside, always busy, always surrounded by noise. Others disappear into isolation, but call it peace. Some suddenly start improving every part of their life externally. Better clothes, cleaner apartment, more disciplined routines. And sometimes those changes are genuine, but sometimes it's emotional displacement. Control becomes easier than vulnerability. I knew someone who started waking up at 5 a.m. every morning after ending a relationship he claimed he was completely over. Started meal prepping, running every day, listening to podcasts nonstop. Everyone around him thought he was thriving. But one night he admitted something quietly that felt far more honest. He said, "If I stop moving, I think about her immediately." That's the part people don't see. The movement is sometimes grief avoidance in disguise. And honestly, masculine emotional avoidance can become incredibly sophisticated because externally can look healthy, discipline, focus, self-improvement. Meanwhile, internally, he's still opening her profile at midnight and pretending it doesn't mean anything. He tells himself, "I'm just curious." But then, why does his stomach tighten when he sees her smiling? Why does he zoom into tiny details? The restaurant, the people around her, the caption tone. Why does he feel irritated afterward without admitting jealousy? He doesn't fully understand it yet because his ego is still protecting him from the deeper realization. He misses emotional access more than he expected to. But during this phase, he usually won't say that out loud. Sometimes not even to himself. Instead, he intellectualizes everything. It just wasn't the right time. We were too emotionally intense. I need to focus on my life. She deserves someone more emotionally available. And sometimes those things contain truth. That's important. Not every masculine withdrawal is malicious. Not every separation is manipulation. Sometimes he genuinely feels incapable of sustaining the depth of connection being asked of him. But emotional incapacity still hurts people. And I think that complexity matters. Because the internet loves extremes. Either he's a villain, or he's secretly enlightened and awakening. Real life is usually less cinematic than that. Sometimes he's just emotionally overwhelmed and deeply unequipped. And unfortunately, unequipped people can still break your heart, even while caring about you. Especially while caring about you. That contradiction confuses people the most. How can someone love you and still avoid you? Honestly, sometimes because love activates everything they spent years suppressing. Fear, need, dependency, grief, insecurity, the possibility of rejection, the possibility of loss. And if emotional intimacy was never modeled safely for him growing up, closeness can feel emotionally disorganizing instead of stabilizing. So, distance starts feeling safer than connection, at least temporarily. But the problem with emotional avoidance is that it creates artificial relief. Temporary relief, not resolution. Because unresolved detachment has a way of leaking through ordinary life eventually. At first, he doesn't notice it. The days still feel manageable. He still believes he's regaining control. Then strange moments start happening. Tiny moments. He hears a song she used to hum absent-mindedly in the kitchen and suddenly skips it aggressively. Not because he doesn't care, because he cares more than he wants to feel right then. Or he reaches for his phone after seeing something funny before remembering. Right, we don't talk anymore. And that realization lands strangely every single time. Not dramatic enough to fully collapse him emotionally, just enough to leave a quiet ache afterward. Sometimes the ache turns into irritation instead of sadness. That happens a lot too. Masculine grief often exits sideways first, through restlessness, emotional numbness, frustration, overworking, detachment, not tears, not immediately. And honestly, some men become colder during this phase because warmth reminds them of what they're avoiding. So they start acting emotionally casual about everything. Too casual, like someone trying very hard not to look affected. Then occasionally the mask slips in tiny ways. A drunk text that gets deleted. A random late night hope you're okay. Watching her stories within seconds. Suddenly becoming distant again after reconnecting briefly. Push, pull, silence, return, retreat. Not because he has some master plan. Sometimes because internally he's still split in half. One side of him relieved to escape the emotional intensity. Another side quietly grieving the connection already. And during the relief phase, those two sides are usually still fighting each other. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about masculine regret is that they imagine it arriving like some dramatic movie scene. Like one night he suddenly breaks down, calls her crying, confesses everything, finally understands the connection all at once. But honestly, a lot of the time regret arrives in pieces so small he barely notices them at first. That's why it takes him so long. Because the realization doesn't hit as one clean emotional truth. It leaks in slowly, through ordinary moments. Annoyingly ordinary moments. That's the part nobody warns him about. It's not always the breakup itself that haunts him. It's what happens afterward when life keeps moving, but the emotional imprint of her stays attached to random parts of his day. Like reaching for his phone after seeing something funny. That one happens a lot. He sees a stupid meme, or hears a joke at work, or notices something oddly specific that only she would understand. And before he can stop himself, his thumb is already opening her chat. Not consciously, not dramatically, just instinct. Like his body still assumes emotional access exists. Then he remembers. Oh, right. We don't talk anymore. And those tiny moments start piling up quietly inside him. Not enough to fully crack the ego yet, but enough to create emotional static. I knew someone who admitted he kept taking screenshots of random things for weeks after the relationship ended. Recipes, songs, tweets, places he wanted to show her. Then one night he opened his camera roll and realized none of them were going anywhere anymore. That realization hit him harder than the breakup itself. Not because of the screenshots, because suddenly he understood how much of his internal life had started including her without him fully realizing it. That's what attachment does sometimes. It quietly integrates someone into your nervous system before your mind fully catches up. And masculine energy especially can be slow to recognize emotional dependence while it's happening. Because dependence feels dangerous to a lot of men, even healthy dependence. Especially healthy dependence. So while the relationship is happening, he focuses on maintaining control, not needing too much, not revealing too much, not becoming that guy who loses himself emotionally. But after separation, the routines expose him. The absence exposes him. Because now there's nobody to send the photo to, nobody to call during the drive home. Nobody waiting for the small details of his day. And weirdly, it's often the smallest details that hurt the most later. Not the grand romantic moments. The ordinary intimacy. Her saying, "Text me when you get home." The way she adjusted the music volume in the car without asking. The fact she always stole fries off his plate after saying she wasn't hungry. The sound of her walking around the apartment barefoot in the morning. Tiny things. Human things. Things he barely noticed consciously at the time because he assumed they'd keep happening. And regret gets cruel when permanence disappears. Because suddenly the mind starts replaying moments it once treated casually. Over and over. Sometimes he doesn't even realize he's replaying her until halfway through the memory. He'll be driving somewhere at night, mentally checked out, staring at traffic lights. Then suddenly remember one sentence she said months ago. Something small. Something he dismissed at the time. Like, "I feel you pulling away." And back then he probably denied it immediately. "No, I'm not." But now he hears the exhaustion in her voice differently. Now he remembers the way she looked out the window after saying it. Now he notices details his defensive mind erased in real time. That's the ugly thing about delayed emotional processing. Sometimes clarity arrives after the damage. And honestly, some men become obsessed with replaying the exact moments they emotionally failed someone. Not publicly, quietly, in private, late at night, in traffic, in the shower, at the gym between sets, during meetings they can't focus through. It becomes intrusive almost, because regret doesn't always scream. Sometimes it lingers. Like emotional background noise he can't fully turn off anymore. And the ego fights this phase hard. That's important to understand. Because part of him still wants to maintain the narrative that leaving was necessary, logical, controlled, correct. So every time grief starts surfacing, another voice interrupts it. You're romanticizing it. You did the right thing. It wouldn't have worked anyway. And maybe some of that is true. That's the complexity here. Not every relationship should survive. Not every separation is a mistake. But emotional truth becomes difficult to suppress when the body keeps reacting anyway. That's why some masculine regret looks so contradictory externally. He says he's moved on, while checking her profile every few days. He tells friends he's fine, while replaying her last voice message alone at 1 a.m. He avoids contacting her, while secretly hoping she reaches out first. Contradiction everywhere. Because emotionally unresolved people often behave in emotionally inconsistent ways. And honestly, shame plays a bigger role in this phase than people realize. not just sadness. Shame. The shame of realizing someone loved you deeply while you were emotionally hiding from them in real time. The shame of remembering moments where she was trying to connect while he emotionally withdrew instead. The shame of recognizing her patience only after losing access to it. That realization can make some men go even quieter. Not because they feel nothing, because now they feel too exposed internally. I remember hearing someone say, the hardest part wasn't losing her, it was realizing she was emotionally alone while still with me. That sentence feels painfully accurate for a lot of these dynamics. Because sometimes masculine regret isn't only, I miss her. Sometimes it's, I see myself more clearly now, and I don't fully like what I see. That's a brutal phase. And honestly, not everyone stays in it long enough to grow from it. Some people escape back into distraction immediately. New attention, new routines, new emotional avoidance. But others start noticing her everywhere accidentally. Not literally, but psychologically. A girl laughs like her in the coffee shop, and his chest tightens unexpectedly. Someone uses a phrase she used to say all the time. A perfume passes by that smells vaguely familiar, and suddenly his nervous system reacts before logic can intervene. That physical reaction confuses him, because he thought he was over it. But grief isn't linear like that. Attachment definitely isn't. Especially when the relationship ended before the emotional bond fully finished unfolding internally. And that's another thing nobody says enough. Some men don't emotionally understand the relationship until after it's already gone. While they're inside it, they focus on pressure, expectations, fear, vulnerability. But after separation, space creates perspective. Painfully late perspective sometimes. There's this very specific kind of masculine loneliness that shows up during this stage too. Not loud loneliness, functional loneliness. The kind where his life technically still works, but emotionally something feels missing from ordinary existence. Meals feel quieter. Success feels flatter. Even social interactions start feeling strangely temporary. And because he doesn't fully know how to articulate emotional longing directly, he starts interacting with ghosts instead. Opening old photos, rereading conversations, listening to old voice notes, searching for emotional contact through memory instead of reality. Sometimes he even starts composing imaginary conversations with her in his head. Not romantic movie speeches either. Awkward ones. Human ones. I should have answered differently that night. Why did I get defensive there? She was literally trying to love me. Then another voice interrupts immediately. Well, she wasn't perfect either. No, she wasn't. And you were overwhelmed. Yeah, but you still heard her. Silence. That silence becomes harder to escape eventually, because regret matures quietly. At first, it's just missing her presence. Then it becomes missing who he was around her. Then sometimes it becomes the horrifying realization that she may have genuinely loved him in ways he wasn't emotionally capable of receiving at the time. That realization destabilizes people more than heartbreak sometimes. Because now the loss isn't abstract anymore. Now it feels personal, real, irreplaceable. And unfortunately, by the time some men fully arrive at that understanding, she has already started emotionally leaving for real. The strange thing about regret is that it rarely attaches itself to the big moments first. Not the breakup, not the final conversation, not even the dramatic fights. Those memories are almost too obvious, too easy for the ego to categorize. She was emotional. We both said things. It ended for a reason. The mind can organize those moments quickly because they fit a narrative. But the small moments, those are harder to defend against. because they slip past logic completely. And eventually, that's what starts haunting him. Not the relationship as a concept. Her. Specifically her. In ordinary human moments, his nervous system accidentally recorded while he was busy trying not to feel too much. That's when the replaying starts. Quietly. Usually at inconvenient times. Driving home late. Standing in the grocery store staring at nothing. Lying awake with a phone in his hand pretending he's watching videos while mentally somewhere else entirely. And what's brutal is how random the memories are. Not cinematic memories. Tiny ones. Like the way she used to say wait before telling a story because she was laughing already. Or the exact expression she made when she caught him staring at her too long. Or the night she fell asleep halfway through a movie and he didn't move because he didn't want to wake her. That memory destroys some men later. Because at the time it felt so normal. That's the tragedy of ordinary intimacy. You don't realize it's becoming emotionally permanent while it's happening. I think some masculine energy especially struggles with this phase because memory becomes emotional evidence his ego can't fully argue with anymore. During the relationship, he could rationalize distance. I just need space. I'm overwhelmed. This is moving too fast. But memory is harder to negotiate with, especially sensory memory. That's the part that sneaks up on him. Smell, tone of voice, silence, lighting, specific songs, the feeling of her hand touching his arm during conversations. The body remembers emotionally before the mind fully accepts loss. That's real. I knew someone who said he accidentally found one of her hair ties wrapped around his wrist weeks after the relationship ended. Just a stupid little black hair tie. He stared at it for almost a minute before taking it off, then immediately put it back on again. Not because he thought it meant destiny. Not because he was trying to be poetic. He just suddenly missed her so violently it caught him off guard. And he hated that feeling. That's important too. A lot of masculine regret comes mixed with resistance. He doesn't always melt into the grief gracefully. Sometimes he gets irritated by it, embarrassed by it, angry that he's still emotionally attached after convincing himself he needed distance. So the replaying becomes obsessive partly because he's trying to solve his own feelings intellectually. Like, why am I still thinking about this? Why does this one memory keep coming back? Why can't I let this go properly? And usually the memory itself seems insignificant from the outside. That's what makes it worse. Maybe it's just her sitting in the passenger seat singing badly to a song she barely knew. Maybe it's the way she reached for his hand absent-mindedly while half asleep. Maybe it's one sentence she said months ago that suddenly sounds completely different now. You don't have to carry everything alone. That kind of sentence hits differently later, especially if he brushed it off emotionally at the time. Because delayed regret has a cruel way of reopening moments with new emotional context. And suddenly he realizes, oh, she was trying to love me there. That realization arrives slowly for some men, painfully slowly, especially if they spent most of the relationship emotionally defending themselves from vulnerability instead of fully receiving it. So now his mind keeps revisiting scenes, trying to emotionally process what he couldn't process in real time, almost like unfinished emotional paperwork. And honestly, the replaying gets worse at night. There's something about nighttime that strips distractions away from masculine avoidance. The noise dies down, the routines stop, the performance relaxes a little, and suddenly he's alone with memory. That's when random emotional details become unbearable. The side of the bed she slept on, the hoodie she always stole, the way she used to say his name when she knew he was emotionally shutting down. Even silence becomes emotionally loaded. especially if the relationship had long periods of unspoken tension near the end. Because now he replays those silences differently too. At the time, he probably told himself, "She's overthinking. She's too emotional. She wants too much reassurance." But months later, he remembers her going quiet after trying to connect with him repeatedly. He remembers her pretending not to cry, pretending not to notice his emotional distance, pretending not to feel abandoned while sitting right beside him. And honestly, that realization can make some men physically sick later. Not dramatically, not movie scene breakdown sick. Worse, quiet sick, chest tightness, restlessness, that hollow feeling after waking up, random anxiety while doing completely normal things. Because guilt processly often enters through the body first, and some masculine energy has no idea how to metabolize emotional guilt directly. So it loops, memory after memory after memory, like the nervous system refusing to let him escape himself completely. I remember hearing a guy admit that he kept replaying one particular moment for almost a year. Not the breakup. At dinner. That's it. He said she had been talking about something vulnerable. Family stuff, I think. And instead of emotionally staying present, he made a joke to deflect the intensity. She laughed politely, then got quieter afterward. At the time, he barely noticed. Months later, he said, "That was the moment she stopped feeling emotionally safe with me." And you could hear how much that realization haunted him. Because now, he wasn't replaying the memory from his own perspective anymore. Now, he was seeing her experience inside the moment too. That shift changes everything. Because masculine regret deepens when empathy finally catches up. Not performative empathy. Real empathy. The kind where he suddenly feels what she probably felt in real time. The confusion. The loneliness. The emotional whiplash of being loved warmly one moment and emotionally shut out the next. And unfortunately, that level of clarity often arrives after the relationship already collapsed under the weight of unresolved avoidance. That's why some men become emotionally obsessed afterward. Not necessarily with getting her back immediately. Sometimes with understanding what happened inside themselves. Why they pulled away. Why intimacy triggered them. Why they became colder the more real the connection became. And those questions don't leave quickly, because the replaying keeps feeding them. He starts noticing patterns retroactively. The way he always withdrew after emotional closeness. The way he picked small arguments when vulnerability increased. The way he suddenly needed space right after moments of genuine intimacy. Part of him begins realizing, maybe I wasn't protecting myself as much as I thought. Maybe I was sabotaging something I actually needed. That realization is deeply destabilizing for emotionally avoidant people. Because now the story changes. Now he's not just grieving her. He's confronting himself. And honestly, sometimes he resists the realization hard. Some nights he misses her deeply. Other nights he gets defensive all over again. She wasn't perfect either. She pushed too hard. I was overwhelmed. And maybe all of that is partially true. But emotional truth gets harder to escape when the memories keep returning with emotional precision. Especially the soft memories. The trusting memories. The moments where she loved him openly while he emotionally stood there halfway armored. Those memories become unbearable eventually. Because he starts realizing something painful. Part of him experienced the relationship cleanly after it ended. And that's the kind of regret that doesn't disappear quickly. Because now every replay carries two losses at once. The loss of her. And the loss of the version of himself he wishes he had been while she was still there. One of the most confusing parts of masculine regret is how often it hides itself behind performance. not intentional manipulation all the time. Sometimes performance is just emotional self-protection, wearing confidence like a costume. Because a lot of men are taught very early that visible longing feels dangerous. Neediness feels dangerous. Grief feels embarrassing. Missing someone to openly feels weak. So instead of expressing loss directly, they perform detachment. And honestly, some of them get very good at it. Good enough that even the people closest to them believe it. He laughs normally, still goes out, still posts online, still replies casually when someone asks, "How are you holding up?" "Yeah, I'm good." And maybe part of him even wants that to be true. But emotional suppression leaks eventually. Always. Usually through tiny behaviors he thinks nobody notices. Like checking her profile late at night without interacting. That behavior alone has probably haunted millions of modern relationships. The quiet stalking, the emotional hovering, watching her stories within minutes, then disappearing again. No message, no explanation, just silent observation. And the strange thing is he often judges himself while doing it. What am I even doing? But he keeps checking anyway, because part of him still wants proximity without vulnerability. That's a very real masculine contradiction. He misses her, but the idea of emotionally exposing how much he misses her still terrifies him. So he settles for fragments instead. Photos, captions, tiny glimpses into her life. Sometimes he stares at one picture too long, trying to decode her emotional state from her eyes. Is she happier? Is she pretending? Is she seeing someone? Does she miss me too? And what's ironic is that while he's doing this, he may still be acting emotionally detached publicly. That duality messes people up, especially her, because from her perspective, his silence feels intentional. Meanwhile, internally, he's having entire emotional conversations he never sends. I think people underestimate how many unsent messages exist inside masculine regret. Not dramatic love confessions necessarily. Small human messages. You would have laughed at this. I saw your favorite snack today. I almost called you. Then the internal shutdown happens immediately afterward. No, don't do that. She's moving on. You already made your decision. Delete. Close the app. Pretend nothing happened. And honestly, pride becomes a prison during this phase. Not confidence. Pride. Because some men would rather silently suffer than risk emotional rejection after they were the one who pulled away. That's the part people rarely talk about honestly. Once he leaves, shame enters the equation too. Especially if deep down he knows she loved him sincerely. Now, reaching out feels emotionally dangerous in an entirely different way. Not just, what if she rejects me? But, what if I hurt her too deeply already? So he stalls, watches from a distance, keeps tabs quietly, finds indirect ways to feel connected without fully stepping back into vulnerability. And sometimes those indirect behaviors become almost compulsive. Checking if she viewed his story, posting things he secretly hopes she notices, acting extra unbothered online while internally feeling anything but unbothered. That performative calm becomes exhausting eventually, because the body knows when someone matters emotionally, even if the ego keeps denying it. I remember hearing someone describe it like this. I kept telling myself I was over her, but every time my phone lit up, part of me hoped it was her before I even looked. That's such a painfully human detail, because longing often happens faster than conscious thought. The nervous system reacts first, hope first, then disappointment, then emotional correction. Oh, and he keeps living inside those tiny rises and crashes privately. That emotional rhythm wears people down over time, especially emotionally avoidant men who are already uncomfortable sitting with unresolved detachment. Because avoidance works best when emotional access disappears completely. But when she still exists online, still exists in memory, still exists emotionally inside him, the suppression becomes harder to maintain consistently. So he starts becoming emotionally inconsistent instead. That's where the mixed energy comes from. Some days he feels certain separation was necessary. Other days he misses her so intensely it irritates him. And masculine grief often comes out sideways before it becomes honest. Through mood swings, restlessness, random withdrawal, irritation at completely unrelated things. Sometimes he becomes colder with everyone emotionally, not just her, because grief has a numbing effect when someone doesn't know how to process it directly. And honestly, loneliness starts changing shape during this phase too. At first, he misses the relationship. Later, he starts missing the emotional safety of her presence specifically. The familiarity, the way she understood small mood shifts, the fact she could tell something was wrong before he even said anything. That kind of emotional recognition becomes difficult to replace casually, especially for men who don't feel deeply understood often. And the really painful part, he may not fully admit how rare the connection was until he starts experiencing people who don't reach him emotionally the same way. That realization sneaks up on him. Maybe he goes on dates. Maybe he talks to someone new. And everything technically seems fine. But internally, he keeps comparing emotional depth unconsciously. Not even intentionally. Just automatically. The way she listened. The way conversations flowed naturally. The way silence with her didn't always feel uncomfortable. And suddenly interactions that once distracted him start feeling emotionally thin. That's when missing her becomes harder to intellectualize away. Because now the absence feels experiential. Physical almost. I think this is also where masculine ego starts fighting reality harder. Because part of him wants to reach out. Another part feels humiliated for still caring. So internally becomes this exhausting back and forth dialogue. You should text her. No. Why not? She probably hates you. She might not. You'll look weak. Maybe. But you miss her. Silence. That silence says everything sometimes. And honestly, some men stay trapped there for months. Feeling emotional movement internally while expressing almost nothing externally. That's why people around them can completely misread what's happening. Especially if he's naturally composed. Because composed men can be emotionally unraveling privately while looking completely functional in public. I knew someone who admitted he used to open her profile every night before bed like some kind of ritual. Not even to analyze anything anymore. Just to feel close to her existence for a second. That detail wrecked me a little when I heard it. Because it's such a lonely form of attachment. Wanting connection. While simultaneously believing you no longer have the right to ask for it. And eventually, the tension starts turning into regret more aggressively. Because now he isn't only missing her presence. He's realizing how much emotional intimacy he took for granted while he had access to it. The reassurance, the consistency, the emotional effort she gave naturally. And memory becomes cruel during this phase. Because now he starts remembering moments where she was trying to love him while he emotionally minimized it. Moments he brushed past. The paragraph she sent explaining her feelings carefully. The nights she stayed patient while he withdrew emotionally. The way she kept trying to understand him instead of attacking him. Those memories feel different now. He sees the love more clearly after losing access to it. And unfortunately, masculine regret often deepens right when feminine energy finally stops reaching emotionally. That timing matters, because as long as she keeps chasing, part of him still feels emotionally buffered from permanent loss. But once she genuinely pulls her energy back, once she stops checking in, stops explaining, stops trying to reopen emotional doors, panic starts mixing with grief. Not loud panic necessarily, quiet panic. The kind that sits in his chest at 2 a.m. while he stares at the ceiling replaying everything he thought he had more time to figure out. And the hardest part, a lot of men don't even know how much they loved her until they feel her emotionally leaving for real. Not physically, emotionally. That's the moment performance starts cracking. Because pretending not to care becomes much harder once her absence stops feeling temporary. I think one of the saddest misunderstandings in relationships like this is that people assume the problem was the lack of love. But sometimes love was never the issue. Sometimes the issue was what love exposed. Because intimacy has a way of forcing people into contact with themselves. Not just with another person, with themselves. And a lot of masculine energy can tolerate attraction much more easily than emotional exposure. Attraction feels manageable. Flirting feels manageable. Desire feels manageable. But intimacy, real intimacy, that's different. Because intimacy removes hiding places. Suddenly, someone notices the shift in his breathing when he's anxious. Someone recognizes the silence he uses when he's emotionally overwhelmed. Someone starts seeing the exhaustion underneath the performance. And for emotionally avoidant men, being deeply seen can feel terrifying even while they crave it. That contradiction sits underneath so much of this dynamic. He wants closeness. Then closeness arrives. And his system starts reacting like danger entered the room. Not because she's dangerous, because emotional exposure is. That's why some of the coldest moments happen immediately after the deepest intimacy. And if you've experienced this kind of connection, you know how disorienting that feels. One night he's open, warm, present, looking at her like he finally stopped running internally for a second. Then the next morning something changes. He gets quieter, more distant, slightly irritated, emotionally harder to reach. And she feels the shift instantly. Women usually do, especially emotionally attuned women. She notices the shorter replies, the lack of eye contact, the subtle withdrawal in his body language. And because intimacy happened right before the shift, she naturally assumes, did I do something wrong? But honestly, sometimes he's pulling away because intimacy affected him too deeply. That's the part people rarely say out loud. Some men emotionally retreat precisely because the connection became too real to emotionally control anymore. I remember hearing someone explain it in a way that felt painfully accurate. He said, "The closer I felt to her, the more aware I became of how much she could hurt me." That sentence explains so much. Because once attachment becomes undeniable, fear enters the room too. Fear of loss, fear of dependency, fear of not being enough, fear of disappointing someone who sees him clearly. And emotionally immature masculinity often experiences vulnerability as pressure instead of connection. So instead of softening deeper into intimacy, he instinctively creates distance from it. Not always consciously. That's important. Some of these reactions happen almost automatically. The body reacts before the ego understands why. That's why he sometimes becomes colder immediately after emotionally vulnerable moments. Not because the vulnerability was fake, because it was real, too real. And now, he feels emotionally exposed in ways he doesn't know how to regulate. So his nervous system reaches for control again. Control through silence. control through detachment, control through emotional distance. I think a lot of women become trapped trying to decode this shift logically. He said he loved being close to me. He opened up. He cried with me. He held me like he meant it. He probably did. That's what makes it confusing. The intimacy was real. The fear afterward was real too. Those two truths can exist simultaneously. And honestly, some men deeply resent how emotionally vulnerable intimacy makes them feel. Not consciously resent her. Resent the exposure itself. Resent how quickly she became emotionally important. Resent how much her attention started affecting his emotional state. Resent how destabilizing genuine closeness became internally, especially if he built his identity around emotional independence. That's why emotionally avoidant masculinity sometimes becomes strangely defensive right when the relationship becomes safest. Because safety increases emotional visibility. Now she sees his moods, his wounds, his inconsistencies, his fear, and he starts feeling psychologically cornered by closeness itself. Not because she's trapping him, because intimacy removes emotional escape routes. There's this specific moment that happens in a lot of these dynamics. The relationship deepens emotionally, and suddenly he starts focusing on tiny flaws or conflicts obsessively. Little things suddenly become issues. The timing matters, because often this happens right after emotional closeness increased significantly. After a vulnerable conversation, after saying I love you, after discussing a future together, after an emotionally intimate weekend. Then suddenly he becomes uncertain. And from the outside it looks irrational. Because part of it is. Avoidance often is irrational emotionally. I knew someone who admitted that after one of the best weekends of his relationship, he picked a fight over something unbelievably stupid. He said she left a wet towel on the floor. That was the argument. But later he admitted, it wasn't about the towel, I just felt too close to her. That level of honesty is rare. Because most people don't realize how often emotional sabotage disguises itself as needing space or being overwhelmed. And honestly, masculine avoidance can feel deeply confusing internally too. Because part of him genuinely wants the intimacy. That's the painful contradiction. He wants her close, then feels overwhelmed when she is. He wants emotional safety, then panics when someone actually reaches him emotionally. He wants love, then starts grieving his independence once love becomes emotionally real. And inside him, those conflicting needs start fighting constantly. I miss her. Then why are you pulling away? I don't know. You said you wanted this. I thought I did. That dialogue happens more than people realize. Not dramatically, usually quietly, in moments where he's alone long enough to hear himself honestly. And unfortunately, instead of communicating that confusion vulnerably, many men default to emotional withdrawal. Because withdrawal feels safer than admitting, I'm scared of how much this means to me. That sentence would require enormous emotional exposure, especially for someone who associates vulnerability with weakness, rejection, or loss of control. So instead, he becomes harder to read, more emotionally inconsistent, and the woman on the receiving end starts emotionally starving inside the relationship without fully understanding why. That's one of the cruelest parts. Because emotionally avoidant love can feel incredibly intimate and deeply lonely at the same time. She feels his love, but not his emotional stability. She feels his care, but not his consistency. And over time, the inconsistency starts exhausting her nervous system too. Because she keeps trying to reconnect with a version of him that appeared during intimacy. The soft version. The emotionally open version. The version that looked at her like he finally stopped hiding. But that version scares him too. That's the tragedy. The most emotionally authentic version of himself often feels the least psychologically safe to maintain. So, after intimacy, he retreats back into emotional management. Work, distraction, distance, control. And honestly, some men don't even realize how much damage this pattern causes until much later. At the time, all they know is, I feel overwhelmed. I need space. I can't do this right now. But later, after enough silence, after enough distance, after enough replaying of memories, he starts seeing the pattern differently. He realizes intimacy itself wasn't suffocating him. The emotional exposure was. And those are not the same thing. Because the relationship may not have actually been asking for perfection, just presence, consistency, emotional honesty, willingness to stay emotionally available during discomfort. But for emotionally avoidant masculinity, that can feel terrifyingly difficult, especially if vulnerability was never modeled safely growing up, especially if love historically came attached to criticism, pressure, abandonment, or emotional unpredictability. Then, suddenly, a healthy connection feels emotionally confusing because his nervous system doesn't fully trust peace yet. So, when closeness deepens, his body interprets emotional dependency as danger instead of safety. And that realization destroys some men later, because eventually he understands something painful. She wasn't asking him to lose himself. She was asking him to stop disappearing emotionally every time love became real. And by the time some men finally understand that difference, they're already sitting alone replaying moments where intimacy tried to love them honestly, while they kept mistaking it for something they needed to escape. I think this is the phase where things start getting harder for him to emotionally outrun. Because up until now, the ego still had room to negotiate. It could explain things away, rationalize the distance, reframe the loss as necessary. But eventually the body starts telling the truth faster than the mind can suppress it. And honestly, that's terrifying for emotionally avoidant people. Because now the grief is no longer staying abstract. Now it's physical. He wakes up feeling heavy for no obvious reason, gets irritated faster, can't focus the same way, starts checking his phone compulsively without meaning to. And the strange part is sometimes he still won't consciously admit he misses her yet. That's how disconnected some men are from their emotional reality initially. The body knows first. The chest tightens first. The sleep gets worse first. The restlessness starts first. Meanwhile, the ego is still sitting there going, you're fine. You just need time. You made the right decision. But the nervous system is already reacting to loss. That contradiction exhausts him more than he realizes. Because suppressing emotion takes energy. A lot of energy. Especially when attachment is unresolved. That's why some men suddenly become emotionally exhausted during this phase, even though nothing dramatic is technically happening externally. Their inner world is fighting itself constantly. I knew someone who described it like this. It felt like my brain and my body were into different relationships. That sentence feels painfully accurate. Because mentally he's trying to maintain distance. Physically, he keeps reacting to her absence anyway. And the reactions are often embarrassingly human. Not spiritual. Not poetic. Human. Like waking up and instinctively reaching to check if she texted before he's even fully conscious. Or hearing a notification sound in public and feeling his stomach drop for half a second. Or unlocking his phone without realizing he already opened her profile 20 minutes earlier. That repetitive behavior says a lot. Because attachment creates rituals. Tiny unconscious rituals. And when the relationship ends, the body keeps trying to complete them automatically. That's why separation can feel so psychologically disorienting, especially for someone who thought distance would create emotional clarity quickly. Instead, his body keeps betraying him. He starts noticing emotional waves hitting at random times, during work meetings, at red lights, at the grocery store. Suddenly, he remembers her standing in the cereal aisle laughing at something stupid, and now his entire mood shifts for the next hour. No warning. And masculine ego hates emotional unpredictability. Hates it because unpredictability feels like loss of control. So naturally, he tries harder to regain emotional composure. More distractions, more routines, more emotional shutdown. But suppression stops working cleanly once grief becomes embodied. That's when insomnia often enters the picture too. And not always obvious insomnia. Sometimes he still sleeps. Just badly. He wakes up exhausted, keeps having fragmented dreams, falls asleep with the TV on because silence feels emotionally dangerous now. And nights become particularly difficult because nighttime removes performance. No coworkers, no notifications, no movement. Just him and the emotional residue he's been trying not to feel fully. That's when the urges to reach out start becoming harder to control. Not always because he has clarity. Sometimes because loneliness physically hurts enough to override pride temporarily. And honestly, a lot of masculine reaching out behavior during this phase is emotionally conflicted. That's important because people romanticize it too much online. Sometimes when he texts her at 1 a.m., he's not fully emotionally evolved suddenly. Sometimes he's just overwhelmed, missing her, panicking, lonely, ashamed, relieved to hear her voice again, terrified of needing her again, all at once. That emotional contradiction comes through in his behavior too. One day he reaches out warmly. The next day he disappears again. And from her perspective it feels cruel, because she experiences the inconsistency directly while he's still internally fighting himself. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains some of it. I think this is also where his body starts exposing truths his ego avoided during the relationship itself, like how attached he actually became. Because attachment reveals itself most clearly through absence, not presence. Presence lets people stay distracted by routine. Absence exposes dependency immediately, and masculine energy often discovers emotional dependency late, because emotional dependence conflicts with the identity many men build around independence. So when his body starts reacting strongly to her absence, it destabilizes his self-image too. Suddenly he's asking himself uncomfortable questions. Why am I still thinking about her this much? Why does this feel worse now? If I wanted distance so badly, why does the silence feel unbearable sometimes? Those questions create emotional panic because they threaten the original narrative he built to justify leaving. And once that narrative cracks, regret starts entering more aggressively. Not cleanly, not all at once, in waves. I remember hearing someone admit that he started driving past places they used to go together without fully meaning to. Like his body was searching for emotional proximity automatically. A coffee shop, a parking lot, a street she used to live on. He said he wouldn't even notice what he was doing until he was already there. That detail feels painfully real to me, because grief often behaves through repetition before understanding arrives. The body revisits what the mind hasn't processed yet. And honestly, masculine grief during this phase can become incredibly private. That's why people around him may still think he's completely okay, especially if he's naturally emotionally reserved. Because externally, he still functions. He still works, still shows up, still jokes around, Meanwhile, internally, his emotional regulation is deteriorating quietly. He becomes more emotionally reactive, more withdrawn afterward, sometimes emotionally numb for days at a time. And what's strange is sometimes he misses her most intensely right after moments where he should technically feel happy. After a successful day, after being surrounded by people, after accomplishing something important. Because success without emotional connection starts feeling weirdly hollow once someone has experienced genuine intimacy. That realization sneaks up on him, especially if she became the person he emotionally shared life with internally. Now, he has experiences with nowhere meaningful to emotionally land them. And eventually the loneliness becomes less about being alone physically, and more about emotional displacement. Nobody knows him the same way. Nobody reaches him the same way. Nobody softens his internal chaos the same way. And the body notices the absence constantly, even while the ego keeps resisting it. That's why some masculine regret becomes physical anxiety eventually. Chest pressure, restlessness, random emotional crashes, mood swings he can't fully explain. Not because he's crazy, because unresolved attachment activates the nervous system continuously when emotions stay unprocessed. And unfortunately, emotionally avoidant people often wait until the discomfort becomes unbearable before confronting emotional truth honestly. That's the tragedy. He waits until silence hurts more than vulnerability, until loneliness becomes heavier than pride, until his body finally forces him to acknowledge what his ego spent months trying to minimize. And even then, he still hesitates. That's the frustrating part, because realization doesn't instantly create emotional courage. Sometimes he fully knows what he feels, and still struggles to act on it, still overthinks, still delays, still drafts messages he never sends. I miss you. Delete. I've been thinking about you lately. Delete. I think I made a mistake. Delete. That hesitation says everything about the war happening inside him. Part of him desperately wants emotional reconnection. Another part is terrified of what reconnection would force him to confront about himself. His avoidance, his inconsistency, the pain he caused, the vulnerability he ran from. So now even reaching out feels emotionally exposing. And the longer he waits, the heavier that exposure becomes psychologically. Because deep down, he starts realizing something his body already understood months ago. He didn't leave because the connection meant nothing. He left because it meant too much. And he didn't know how to stay emotionally open without feeling overwhelmed by it. I think this is the moment that changes everything for him. Not always immediately. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes all at once. Sometimes through one tiny interaction that shouldn't matter as much as it does. But eventually he notices something different about her energy, and it unsettles him in a way he didn't expect. Because for a long time, even during separation, part of him still felt emotionally connected through her effort, through her responses, her emotional availability, her checking in, her lingering softness. Even if they weren't together anymore, she still emotionally reached toward him somehow. And that emotional reach becomes strangely comforting to avoidant masculinity. Not consciously, but psychologically. Because as long as she's still trying, part of him believes the connection is still waiting for him, still accessible, still recoverable later. That illusion matters more than he realizes. Because emotionally avoidant people often move through relationships assuming time is more flexible than it actually is. They assume feelings will stay suspended where they left them. But feelings don't freeze like that. Especially not after repeated emotional inconsistency. Eventually, exhaustion replaces longing. And the terrifying thing for him is that he usually notices the shift to late. At first, it's subtle. She stops double texting, stops asking emotional questions, stops trying to decode his silence. And honestly, some men initially interpret this as relief. No pressure anymore. She's finally giving me space. But then something strange happens. The silence changes texture. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Before, her silence still felt emotionally connected somehow. Like underneath it, there was still waiting, still hope, still emotional movement toward him. Now it feels still, cold almost, not cruel, just absent. And that difference hits his nervous system immediately, especially if he's been subconsciously relying on her emotional availability this whole time. I remember hearing someone describe the exact moment he realized she was emotionally done. He said, "She stopped trying to make me understand her." That line stayed with me, because emotionally invested people explain themselves repeatedly. They keep reaching, keep clarifying, keep hoping to be emotionally met. When that stops, something important has usually shifted internally. And masculine energy often mistakes emotional exhaustion for emotional independence until it's too late. He thinks she's just calming down. No, sometimes she's detaching. And those are very different things. That realization destabilizes him because now emotional access no longer feels guaranteed. Now, when he checks her profile, something feels different. She looks lighter. Or maybe sadder, or maybe just elsewhere emotionally. And suddenly, he can't feel himself inside her emotional world the same way anymore. That's what panics him. Not always another man, not always jealousy. Sometimes it's the terrifying realization that her emotional focus is no longer centered around him. That she's slowly rebuilding an inner life he no longer has automatic access to. And for emotionally avoidant masculinity, that loss of emotional access can trigger delayed panic intensely. Because, ironically, now that she's pulling back emotionally, his attachment system activates harder. That contradiction confuses him deeply. Why do I suddenly want closeness now? Because distance became real. Not theoretical. Not temporary. Real. And the body knows it before the ego fully catches up. That's why some men suddenly become more emotionally reactive once she genuinely detaches. Now her delayed reply affects him. Now her absence feels loud. Now seeing her happy without him creates actual grief instead of vague discomfort. And honestly, part of him admires her while grieving her simultaneously during this phase. That complexity matters. Because when feminine energy finally stops chasing, something often changes in her presence. She becomes calmer, more self-contained, less emotionally reactive toward him. And instead of feeling victorious, he feels displaced. Because now he's facing a version of her that no longer revolves emotionally around his inconsistency. That's hard for him to process. Especially if he unconsciously expected her love to remain emotionally available indefinitely. There's this specific kind of masculine confusion that happens here too. He starts reaching subtly, testing emotional access. Maybe he watches her stories more consistently, likes something randomly after months of silence, sends a casual message that pretends to be low stakes. Hope you've been good. And underneath that simple sentence is usually a much deeper question. Do I still exist emotionally to you? That's what he's really asking. Because now uncertainty enters his side too. Before, she was the emotionally vulnerable one. The one waiting. The one reaching. Now suddenly he's the one searching for emotional signs. And honestly, some men become emotionally obsessive during this phase precisely because her energy stopped feeding the connection constantly. The emotional supply disappeared. No more reassurance. No more visible longing. No more emotional pursuit. Now, he has to sit alone with the full emotional weight of his own feelings. No distractions from her ever anymore. And that's when regret often deepens aggressively. Because now, he starts understanding what her presence was emotionally doing for him all along. Grounding him, softening him, emotionally regulating him in quiet ways he took for granted. The loss becomes experiential now. Physical. I knew someone who admitted that after she emotionally detached, the house started feeling too quiet. Not literally quiet. Psychologically quiet. No emotional warmth waiting somewhere in the background anymore. No sense that someone still cared what happened to him emotionally. And suddenly, all the distance he fought for started feeling unbearable. That realization can create enormous shame too. Because deep down, he starts recognizing something painful. She gave him emotional chances he didn't fully value while he had them. That awareness hurts. Especially once he notices she's no longer emotionally begging for understanding. No longer trying to convince him to stay emotionally present. There's grief in that silence. And honestly, sometimes her detachment is the first thing that finally forces him to confront the permanence of loss. Not because she became cold, because she stopped abandoning herself trying to reach him. That difference matters deeply, and he feels it. Even if she still responds kindly, even if there's technically still communication, the emotional dynamic changed. She's no longer emotionally chasing connection at the expense of herself. And suddenly, he realizes something terrifying. He may have actually pushed away someone who loved him very sincerely. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but sincerely. And now, she's emotionally slipping out of reach while he's only beginning to understand the depth of what he lost. That timing destroys people internally. Especially emotionally delayed men, because now the grief is no longer abstract. Now it's attached to consequences, real consequences. The possibility that she may genuinely move forward emotionally without him. And this is usually the phase where masculine pride starts collapsing against emotional reality, because suddenly the ego can't comfort him the same way anymore. She'll always be there. Will she? She still cares. Maybe. But differently now. You still have time. Do you? That question starts haunting him. Especially late at night. Especially during moments where he realizes her emotional energy no longer reaches for him automatically. And honestly, that's when some men finally understand the emotional damage inconsistency causes. Not theoretically. Personally, because now he's experiencing what emotional distance actually feels like from the other side. The uncertainty, the silence, the emotional unavailability. And the cruel irony is that by the time he fully understands her pain, she's usually already exhausted from carrying it alone for too long. That's why some masculine regret becomes desperate during this phase. Not manipulative desperate necessarily. Emotionally destabilized desperate. Because now he isn't just grieving the relationship. He's grieving the version of her that once waited for him with an open heart. And deep down, he knows he may never fully get that version back again. I think this is the part people oversimplify the most. The return. Because the internet loves turning masculine regret into a fantasy. He always comes back. He finally realizes your worth. He awakens. But real life is usually messier than that. Sometimes he comes back sincere. Sometimes confused. Sometimes lonely. Sometimes emotionally changed. Sometimes still emotionally inconsistent. And sometimes he comes back because enough time finally passed for him to feel what he couldn't feel while he was running from it. That's the uncomfortable truth underneath a lot of delayed masculine regret. Distance gave him clarity, but the clarity arrived late. Too late sometimes. Because while he was inside the relationship, his emotional system was overloaded. Too much vulnerability, too much intimacy, too much emotional exposure happening faster than he knew how to process. So all he could focus on was escape, peace, relief, control. But once the distance settles, once the nervous system calms enough to stop reacting defensively every second, he starts seeing things differently, painfully differently. And the timing of that realization creates enormous guilt. Because now he's emotionally arriving at truths she was trying to explain months ago. Things he dismissed before suddenly make sense. You shut down when things get real. At the time, he probably got defensive immediately. No, I don't. But now he's sitting alone replaying every moment he emotionally disappeared after intimacy. And honestly, some men hate themselves a little during this phase. Not in a dramatic self-destructive way necessarily. More like quiet disgust. The kind where you remember a moment and physically cringe because you finally understand how your behavior affected someone else emotionally. Like remembering the look on her face after he pulled away emotionally for no clear reason. Or remembering how long she tried to communicate gently before finally becoming exhausted. Or realizing she wasn't asking for too much. She was asking for emotional consistency. That realization hits differently later. Especially because avoidant masculinity often experiences emotional needs as pressure in real time, then recognizes them as love in hindsight. That's the tragedy. Perspective arrives after distance. Empathy arrives after loss. And suddenly, he starts understanding the relationship emotionally instead of defensively. That changes everything internally. Because now he's no longer just reacting to intimacy. Now he's grieving it. Actually grieving it. Not numbing. Not intellectualizing. Not performing detachment. Feeling it. And once masculine grief becomes honest, the urge to reconnect often becomes overwhelming. But here's where things get complicated. Wanting to come back emotionally and being emotionally capable of sustaining intimacy are not automatically the same thing. That distinction matters so much because some men return emotionally sincere but still emotionally unequipped. And sincerity without emotional growth can recreate the same damage all over again. I think people deserve honesty about that. Not every return is transformation. Sometimes it's loneliness. Sometimes it's panic. Sometimes it's genuine love mixed with unresolved avoidance. Human beings are complicated like that. I remember hearing someone admit, "I knew I loved her when I realized peace felt emptier than chaos without her." That sentence feels deeply masculine somehow, because many emotionally avoidant men don't recognize love through softness initially. They recognize it through absence, through what disappears emotionally after someone leaves. The warmth, the grounding, the emotional witness, the feeling of being known by someone. And once those things are gone long enough, his emotional reality changes. Now distractions stop working the same way. Now casual connections feel emotionally thin. Now silence feels heavier instead of relieving. And eventually the ego loses the argument. That's usually when he starts seriously thinking about reaching out. Not casually checking her profile anymore, actually reaching out. And honestly, that process is rarely smooth internally. People imagine some confident masculine realization, but a lot of the time it looks more like this. Typing, deleting, rewriting, closing the app, opening it again. He stares at one message for 40 minutes because every version feels emotionally exposing somehow. Hey, to casual, I miss you. Too vulnerable, I've been thinking about us. Too heavy, So he keeps editing his emotions down into something safer. That's why some masculine returns sound emotionally restrained at first. Not because the feelings are small, because vulnerability still scares him. Especially now. Because now he's no longer protected by emotional distance. Now he risks rejection too. And honestly, some men don't fully expect how much shame waits for them during the return phase. Because now they must face the emotional consequences of their absence directly. Now they have to confront the possibility that she no longer trusts them emotionally. Or worse, that she no longer needs them emotionally. That realization humbles people quickly, especially men who unconsciously assumed the connection would remain emotionally available while they figured themselves out. Time feels different once she stops emotionally waiting. That's when urgency enters his system. Not toxic urgency necessarily. Real urgency. The realization that emotional access to another human being is not permanent. And sometimes the grief becomes so intense during this phase because he finally understands what she actually represented emotionally. Not just romance. Safety. Softness. Acceptance. Home. That word comes up a lot privately with men who experience deep emotional regret. Home. Not in some fantasy soulmate way. In a nervous system way. Like, my body rested differently around her. And once that realization fully lands, he often wants to rebuild the connection immediately. But reality is cruel sometimes. Because while he was slowly processing his emotions, she was slowly processing her pain. And those timelines rarely match perfectly. That's why some reunions feel emotionally uneven. Now he's emotionally open, while she's emotionally cautious. Now he wants closeness, while she's protecting herself. And honestly, the reversal destabilizes him. Because for the first time, he feels what emotional uncertainty actually does to the body. Waiting, wondering, hoping, overanalyzing responses. The same emotional state she carried for months. And part of him knows he created that dynamic. That awareness hurts. Especially if she responds kindly but differently now. Softer boundaries. Less emotional urgency. Less chasing. That shift forces him to confront something painful. Love does not always survive emotional inconsistency unchanged. Sometimes people still care deeply, but no longer feel safe enough to surrender emotionally the same way. And honestly, some masculine returns happen because he genuinely changed. Therapy, self-awareness, loss, time, consequences. People can grow. That's true. But some returns happen simply because the silence finally became unbearable. And distinguishing between those two realities matters deeply. Because regret alone does not automatically create emotional maturity. Sometimes he misses her deeply and still hasn't learned how to stay emotionally available consistently. That contradiction exists too. I think this is why some masculine returns feel emotionally messy instead of triumphant. Because he's carrying multiple truths simultaneously. I love her. I heard her. I want another chance. I'm scared I'll fail again. I miss her. I'm ashamed of how long it took me to understand. All of those feelings can exist together. And honestly, some men delay coming back precisely because the regret became so big emotionally. Now the stakes feel terrifying. Now reaching out means admitting, you were right about things I wasn't ready to face. That level of vulnerability feels enormous for emotionally avoidant people, especially men who built their identity around emotional control. So even after realizing the truth, they hesitate, delay, overthink, watch from a distance longer than they should. And that's why he often comes back late. Not because the connection wasn't real. Because emotionally delayed masculinity processes intimacy slower than the damage it creates. By the time he fully understands what the relationship actually meant to him, she may already be exhausted from surviving the version of him that couldn't love her openly while he still had the chance. I think this is the part nobody really wants to talk about honestly, because it ruins the fantasy. The fantasy says, if the connection was real enough, love will wait forever. But real human beings don't work like that. People get tired. People change. People reach emotional limits they never thought they'd reach. And sometimes someone can love you deeply while slowly accepting they can no longer survive the version of love you're offering them. That's the heartbreaking part. Because by the time some masculine energy finally becomes emotionally honest, she's already exhausted. Not always angry. Not always bitter. Sometimes just tired in a way that changes her permanently. And honestly, I think that's the part that devastates him most in the end. Not just losing her, realizing she lost herself trying to hold the connection together for too long. That realization carries a specific kind of guilt, especially for emotionally delayed men. Because now he's finally ready to look directly at the relationship without defensiveness. And what he sees hurts. He sees the nights she stayed patient while he emotionally disappeared. The conversations she tried to have gently. The reassurance she begged for without wanting to beg. He sees her trying to love him round his avoidance instead of being loved properly in return. And the worst part, sometimes she looked calm while breaking internally. He didn't fully understand that at the time. A lot of men don't. Because feminine emotional exhaustion doesn't always look dramatic at first. Sometimes it looks like quieter texts, less arguing, less emotional reaction. And emotionally avoidant men often misread that shift completely. They think, finally, less pressure. No. Sometimes she's giving up. That's different. And by the time he realizes the difference, the emotional damage has already settled into her nervous system deeply. I remember hearing someone say, she stopped asking questions before she left emotionally. That sentence feels devastatingly real. Because questions are investment. Even frustration is investment sometimes. When someone stops trying to understand you emotionally, stops trying to reconnect, stops trying to reopen conversations, something inside them has usually gone quiet. And unfortunately, masculine regret often arrives right as feminine hope starts dying. That timing creates tragedy, because now he's emotionally awake to the relationship, while she's emotionally numb from carrying it alone too long. And people don't talk enough about how painful that mismatch is, especially for him. Because now he finally feels everything he avoided. The love, the grief, the attachment, the fear. But now there's consequences attached to those feelings. Real consequences. She may not trust him anymore. She may still care, but no longer feel emotionally safe. She may have learned how to live without him. And honestly, that last part destroys some men quietly. Not because another man replaced him necessarily, because she replaced the emotional dependence. That's what hurts. She stopped emotionally orbiting him. And now, he's left staring at the emotional space she once occupied in his life, realizing how much warmth existed there before he took it for granted. There's this specific moment that happens sometimes after delayed masculine awakening. He reaches out sincerely, more honestly than before, more emotionally open than before, and she responds kindly, but cautiously, not cold, not cruel, just careful. And suddenly he understands what emotional inconsistency actually costs. Trust, safety, ease, softness. The relationship may still exist in some form, but innocence doesn't. That realization humbles people deeply. especially men who assumed love could survive endless emotional withdrawal and changed. I think some masculine regret becomes unbearable because he starts understanding the timeline differently. Back then he thought, I just need time. Now he realizes she was bleeding emotionally while giving him that time. That awareness changes memory completely. Now, when he replays the relationship, he sees things he missed before. The sadness behind her patience, the loneliness inside her reassurance, the way she kept trying to emotionally reach someone who was already halfway retreating internally. And honestly, some men cry much later than expected because of this exact realization. Not during the breakup. Months later, when the emotional numbness wears off enough for empathy to fully arrive. That's when it hits him. She wasn't hard to love. She was hard to receive while he was emotionally defended against intimacy. That truth is painful, because now the problem feels internal instead of circumstantial. Now he can't blame timing entirely. Our stress, our fear. Now he sees his own avoidance clearly. And unfortunately, clarity after loss feels different than clarity during connection. During connection, there's still room to repair. After loss, there's uncertainty. Maybe she'll give another chance. Maybe she won't. Maybe she still loves him. Maybe she's too hurt to risk herself again. That uncertainty becomes part of his grief now. And honestly, some men finally become emotionally available only after losing someone emotionally irreplaceable to them. Not because pain magically transforms people overnight, but because consequences for self-confrontation in ways comfort never did. Now, there's no emotional buffer protecting him from himself anymore. No reassurance. No chasing. No emotional labor being carried for him quietly in the background. Just him, and the full emotional reality of what happened. That solitude changes people sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. I think the hardest part for him is realizing she probably didn't stop loving him suddenly. That's what hurts. She likely detached slowly, painfully, in stages. One disappointment at a time. One emotionally lonely night at a time. One unanswered need at a time, until eventually survival became stronger than attachment. And once someone reaches that point emotionally, love changes shape. It becomes quieter, more cautious, less willing to self-abandon. That's why some reunions fail even when love still exists. Because love alone cannot erase emotional history. And honestly, some men struggle deeply with the guilt of understanding things too late. Too late to prevent the damage. Too late to protect her softness. Too late to become the version of themselves the relationship needed earlier. That regret stays with people, especially the emotionally intelligent ones who finally wake up to their own patterns afterward. I knew someone who admitted, the worst feeling wasn't losing her. It was knowing I became emotionally honest after she stopped believing honesty from me mattered anymore. That sentence feels like the entire tragedy of delayed masculine growth. Because sometimes transformation arrives, but not within the same emotional timing as the relationship. And that's the cruel reality nobody romanticizes enough. Love does not always pause itself while someone figures themselves out emotionally. People have limits. Nervous systems have limits. Hearts have limits. Even deep love has limits when emotional safety disappears for too long. And maybe that's the final lesson underneath all of this. Not some perfect spiritual conclusion. Not some fantasy about destined reunion. Just a painfully human truth. Sometimes the people genuinely love each other, but one of them learns how to love honestly only after the other person got tired of surviving the waiting. And I think that's the part nobody prepares him for. The possibility that she didn't stop loving him all at once. She just slowly realized love could not keep costing her peace forever. And by the time he finally understood how deeply she mattered, she had already spent months teaching herself how to live with the ache of letting him go.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.